The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports. From the South Stands, it's the Broncos Squad. Everything Denver Broncos every week.
A win is a win, gentlemen. It is a 10-7 win for the Denver Broncos as they take down the Las Vegas Raiders on Thursday Night Football. Short week, but the things that you and I discussed, like Nick, you, and Cody all talked about it in the press box today leading up to the game, like this was going to be, style points kind of mattered, I felt like, in this game. And unfortunately for the Broncos, there was not many style points. We'll start with you, Nick, your initial thoughts.
Woo! Yeah, it was kind of a episode of Benny Hill, and there were so many fumbles, tweaks, and so many things that I can't really put into words to describe what it was that I actually saw. It was almost like watching a baby giraffe born for the first time, trying to stand on their own 2 feet. That's how bad it was tonight. Now, you know what? I mean, I expected more from the Broncos today because I went on record as saying, hey, the Broncos, this is going to be a get-right game for them. We're talking about 45 points. Man, boy, I should have took the under on that one. But highly disappointing in what I saw tonight. How about you guys?
Yeah, and, it's strange, right? Because they're 8-2. They're on a 7-game win streak, and it doesn't feel like that right now just because of the way that the offense is playing. And Cody, you're a defensive guy, with your experience playing football and whatnot. I mean, the defense is absolutely, as you alluded to, the David Goggins line. Who's going to carry the boats? Right now, it is the Denver Broncos defense.
They're carrying the boats. I mean, they're doing overtime there. I mean, they're going back. They're lapping the offense in terms of carrying the boats to where they need to be. Nick knows this, having played on a really great defense. I know this. I've played on really great defenses. At some point, and I've played on great defenses where we didn't have the best offense, right? At some point, that's going to start to boil over. And I don't think it's gotten there yet, but there was a little bit more of a vibe in the locker room where, offensive guys were saying we have to play better. J.K. Dobbins, I felt like, had probably the best answer out of everybody, saying that, we this is not what we should play like. This is not what fans expect us to play like. And then you got defensive guys that say, it's working right now, but if we get to the postseason, we can't keep playing this way. And Denver is on track to make it to the postseason, but they can't play like this. This is going to sink them very, very early. They would be one and done if they play like this on the offensive side of the ball and special teams. What blows my mind about this, gentlemen, is the fact that this Broncos defense was literally handed the worst starting field position throughout the entire game. They gave up 1 touchdown, but then they tightened that grip a little bit. They overcame so much in tonight's win, which, look, 8-2 is great. Best record in the NFL, great. But it's not sustainable if this team is going to reach their goals of winning a Super Bowl or even winning a playoff game. This isn't it.
Yeah, I mean, they play Buffalo in the playoffs. They play Kansas City in the playoffs. Heck, they play Indianapolis or Pittsburgh. I ain't picking the Broncos. And look, I'm just not being a homer right now. It's just like the offense is absolutely abysmal. And the punting
Cowboys fan.
Well, don't out me like that, brother. You know how I feel about that organization and that team. I could do 7,000 eons worth of shows on that organization. But because of that, I feel like I could be a little bit more objective about it. And, it feels like the Broncos right now, I think we talked about it a bit in the last show. Like, I don't think they are what their record says they are. And I know Sean Payton got a little chippy with a reporter there after the game who was, kind of feeding into that dynamic a little bit, but there are some real problems. And I think evident, and we'll dive into this much later on in the program. I looked ahead. The Broncos are 3.5 point home underdogs for when they take on the Kansas City Chiefs. That's the look ahead line. So,
yeah, it's Andy Reid coming off the bye week. Look, Denver gets a mini bye, but Nick, you're a former player. You've been part of bye weeks. How good is a bye week for a team at this juncture of the season? And sometimes can it lead you into like maybe falling into a trap? It's like, hey, we haven't played for a week. Is there any rust associated with that? Like, what is your thought on playing a team that's coming off their bye week?
Well, there's two schools of thought. In this case, let's talk about what the Broncos are right now. They need to get away from football just a little, but you worry about whatever momentum that they've built up at this point, them possibly losing it. I mean, you're talking about Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and we all know the data, the statistical say that, after a bye week, Kansas City typically plays pretty well. And then watching the Broncos not really do well in the first three quarters, and here it is again in the fourth quarter where everyone was like, hey, wait till the fourth quarter. That's when they're going to turn it on. And then the faucet never came on. So you have to wonder, what this team is going to be like when they come off this bye week, because this is going to play in their heads. They're going to say offensively, we did not really show what we truly think we are on Thursday Night Football in front of the world. And the defense is saying, you know what? We balling out every single week. So right now, Cody, I know everyone is saying the right things inside the locker room, but I've been here before. I've seen this movie. It's going to get to a point where, as they say, pressure bursts pipes, and someone on defense, they're going to do exactly what Chase Brown did with the Cincinnati Bengals when he called out the defense. Someone on the defense is going to say, to hell with this, and they're going to call out the offense, and they're not going to give a damn about the rat that's going to come from Sean Payton, because what can he really actually say?
Yeah, it's interesting because they're winning, right? Like, I think you would have seen those comments maybe surface a little bit, of that frustration maybe come out a little bit more if they were losing these games. But it's so weird that we're talking negatively or down on a team that currently has the best record in the NFL, right? But it's just, it feels a bit 2022 Vikings-esque, right? That team that was led by Case Keenum with a good defense, and they fell apart. In the NFC Championship game, they obviously had the Mile High Miracle, what do they call it? Not Mile High Miracle. I forget what it's called, but you know what
Minneapolis
I'm talking about.
Miracle.
There you go. Minneapolis
2017.
Miracle. 2017. Sorry, I don't know where my head's at.
You're old, brother.
Brother, I'm like 5 years younger than you. I don't want to hear it. No, but point being, like, I think it's really interesting, the reality of the situation with the Broncos with regards to their record, but the emotions that go along with that, Cody, because I don't think anyone in Broncos country, I see we got a comment here, a lot of teams would love to have 8 wins right now. In fact, every team would. I agree with that, but I don't 100%. Think anyone right now is confident in the Denver Broncos big picture-wise this season.
I mean, they certainly didn't help the perspective of them playing on the national stage the way that they did here on Thursday night. Granted, look, it's a short week. Okay, that's fine, but we've seen teams piece together. We've seen a Broncos team last year when they had to play the New Orleans Saints on Thursday night. They put together a collective performance on offense, defense, and special teams on a road game here. The thing that I'm looking at with this Broncos team here is they're getting consistency from their defense. I think the identity of this team is rooted in the defense. They are the glue that is holding everything together. What is it? You have a meme, there's a water leak, and it's like the Gorilla Glue or the Gorilla Tape. They're smacking it on. That's the Broncos defense right now. And this offense hasn't even played up to the level I think we all know that they can. They have personnel, but there are things and little nuances that we're going to get into, obviously, as the show goes about here tonight, that are going to talk about some of those, what I call warts on the offensive side of the ball. And there's a lot of dirty hands on that operation. It's easy to blame Bo, but I know all those little acronym bros and with all their little charts and the data graphs, they're going through and they're saying, oh yeah, this is going to be fun for Monday's conversation. But the reality is simple. The Broncos offense, they make things too complicated for themselves. And in the same breath, they're putting the defense in a tough spot. But luckily the defense, they're answering the call.
So let me ask you guys this question, because what we're looking at is a great defense and a sputtering offense. So if I'm going to give you guys 2 teams, and you tell me whether you feel the Broncos are more like Team A or more like Team B. Here it is. So the Baltimore Ravens with Trent Dilfer at the quarterback, or Brad Johnson at quarterback with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Which one would you say at this point in the season that the Broncos are leaning more towards? Now, both of those teams that I gave you, they both went to the Super Bowl and they won the Super Bowl. So which one?
That's tough.
Great question. That's a great question.
I feel like it's Tampa Bay. I feel like it's a little Tampa Bay-esque, in my field there. But yeah, because
like Warren Sapp on the defensive line.
Hard. like, think about this. Like, think about what the Broncos defense has done so far. Like, how many stops did they get? Or, especially like special teams. Don't even get me started on the Jeremy Crawshaw shanks that he had. Luckily, he bounced back later on the game. But how many times did the Broncos defense start on the wrong side of their own 50? And it had nothing to do with what they did. It had everything to do with offense going 3 and out, special teams not coming up to par there. And obviously, the punter for the Raiders almost had an MVP-like performance with his leg, pinning the Broncos inside the 5 a few times. I look at what this defense overcame here on Thursday night, and it's the bright spot. Like, it's the highlight of an 8-2 team right now, and they're fun. And they're on a historic pace, though, gentlemen. I think we definitely got to highlight that. 63 sacks last year in total for this team. They're at 46 right now. They had 6 sacks tonight, and they are, what was the next closest team to them in terms of sacks? The Detroit Lions have 28. That is unbelievable.
That's
right
wild.
here.
Yeah, it's an otherworldly defense. And to answer your question, Nick, like, I'd probably lean towards Tampa Bay myself. I mean, you're talking about 2 teams that had really stout defenses, right? Like Ray Lewis and company in Baltimore. And I look at Tampa Bay, right? That was John Lynch, Rondé Barber, Warren Sapp up front.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there were some players on that team. And, that's that was Gruden, and I'm forgetting Brian Billick, right? The head Brian Billick, I believe, was the head coach for Baltimore back then as well.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious to get your opinion, Nick.
Well, for me, I'm leaning more towards Tampa Bay because I'll say that Brad Johnson had a little more skill set than Trent Dilfer. Now, that Baltimore team also had special teams as well. That's something that the Broncos really don't have at right now. And once again, my father used to say, you never miss the water till the well runs dry. And I've always felt as though thus far this season, even last season, Marvin Mims was underappreciated. I bet you appreciate him now, right?
Yep.
Because the numbers and him setting the field from a special team standpoint, it's not there. But also, I got another question for you guys because I heard this a lot, and I hadn't even had a conversation with my wife because, yes, was it windy at the game tonight? Yes, it was. But the Crawshaw issues with the punt were blamed on the wind, right? The wind.
No.
I was like, no, telling my wife, no. Let me show you the video so you know it is not the damn wind.
You should have seen the text message my wife sent me. She sent me a text. She says, "Is Crawshaw sick?" And he's Australian. She goes, "Is he down under?" I was like, "Oh, it's clever." She pulled the clever one out there. I was like, "All right, hey, that was a good." Like, I was on one in the press box today. I was.
Oh, you were.
Cody, euphemisms left and right. We got to mic myself up during the press box sometime. I feel like I was just on one.
Yeah, you got to come sit with us during one of these home games, Nick, because it's free entertainment sitting next to this guy with his one-liners and whatnot.
Out, man. I don't want to get kicked out the press box because there's a certain level of decorum you're supposed to have in the press box. But if it's to the magnitude of you saying what Cody behaved like today, we're all getting kicked out.
Yeah, and it's all in good fun, right? At the end of the day, it's all in good fun. And look, man, at the end of the day, it's a win, right? And it's I feel like we're going to talk about the defense here in the next segment, so we'll be pretty positive there. But when it comes to the offense, there is a lot to unpack and just a lot of questions that need answers right now. And real quick, to go back to the win dynamic, I was sitting there in Evan Ingram's scrum after the game, and he was asked about that, and he essentially kind of shrugged it off. It was like, no, like that did not really factor into the way that this game played out for the Broncos on offense. And frankly, it's a team offensively that's still searching for their identity. Like, I think they have a guy in J.K. Dobbins that, is a lead back type of guy. He's been one of the better running backs in the league, right? You feel okay about their wide receiving core, but a lot of it comes down to Bo Nix. And frankly, even more so, I think it comes down to the play calling, Cody.
Nick, how many carries did J.K. Dobbins have in the first half?
He had 4 carries for 24 yards, and his longest was about 13 yards. Now, here's what's interesting about these particular numbers, because I had to go back and check. I was like, wait a minute. It was almost like an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Like, I've seen this before, right? So in the Houston Texans game, guess what it was at halftime? 4 carries, 24 yards. His longest was 13 yards.
Crazy.
And I started telling myself, prepping myself, okay, Nick, based on these numbers, here's a couple of things we know. Sean's not running the ball as much as he should, but also wait to the fourth quarter, right? That's when the other shoe is going to drop, but the other shoe never dropped. So I don't get it.
they're not running with anybody else. Like RJ's getting maybe 4 carries in a game, or I think it was 4 carries for 9 yards. And like, to me, the recipe is there for this offense. It's run the football. It's JK's got it going. It's 3rd and 1. Don't even get me started on the 3rd and 1 call where it's like the run game was working. You're rattling off a nice little drive, and then you throw it to Cortland Sutton. You want to design a little trick play where he's got to go 5 yards backwards, gets tackled. I'm sitting there and like, this is exactly the like, you see when Bo's frustrated. This is what I think everybody means when Sean Payton just tries to get too cute sometimes. Like, we can all admit at times, Sean, I think he's a great play designer, but people need to start being honest about Sean Payton as a play caller, and that I don't know if he's consistently got enough. I think he's trying to show off too much. He doesn't need to. It is there. Run the ball.
The NFL season is rolling along, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for this weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet in the moment, whether it's player props, a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
The Raiders take down the Raiders on Thursday Night Football, a game of self-inflicted wounds.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast.
There's a lot to get to. Man, there's a lot to get to. This is a game, as I was doing my ESPN radio show Game Night, I just kept saying each and every time that I was talking about the game, like, this is just an ugly game by both teams. Like, make no mistake about it. The Raiders defense did their job. The Raiders defense did a good enough job to win the game. The Raiders offense, not so much. And as I said at the opener, a missed opportunity game, a self-inflicted wound game, just something that the Raiders couldn't get out of their own way. They literally beat themselves on Thursday Night Football. Geno Smith was 16 for 26, 143 yards, 1 interception, and sacked 6 times. And the 1 interception, it bounced off Ashton Genty's hands. It wasn't the greatest pass. It was a little bit behind him, but he should have caught it, right? If he had thrown it out in front of him, it probably would have been a big gainer, but it wasn't. Instead, it bounces off Ashton Genty's hands. That's an interception. Genty, 19 carries, 60 yards, and a touchdown. He was cooking early. Penalty on Jack Besh. Boom. All of a sudden, he loses a 30-yard gain that he had and seemed like it never was the same. Tyler Lockett, he was the leading receiver. Again, Tyler Lockett was the leading receiver for the Raiders. 5 catches, 44 yards. Brock Bowers, who should be the leading receiver, 1 catch, 31 yards. Yeah, that's it, just 1. The Raiders defense, I mentioned they did a good enough job to win the game, and they did. Caillou Blue Kelly came up with a couple interceptions. One was a terrible throw from Bo Nix, just a super overthrow. Caillou came down with the ball, even had some nice return yardage on it. And then one that bounced off Troy Franklin's hands, and Caillou came up with that one as well. So, those tip balls that normally just fall to the ground, the Raiders were able to come up with that one. So he had 2 interceptions on his own. Problem is, Raiders couldn't do anything with it. The defense held Bo Nix to 150 yards, 1 touchdown on the night, and 2 interceptions. And that 1 touchdown came on a short field, right? The Raiders decided to go for it on 4th and 5, and they got sacked, one of the 6 sacks on the night, and ultimately gave the ball to the Broncos at midfield. And Denver goes down and scores their only touchdown of the night. Normally, I'm a guy that says go for it, go for it, go for it, be aggressive. And on that time, especially with the way that A.J. Cole had been punting, where he was pinning the Broncos deep, I would have had no problem playing the field position game. So sometimes, you get criticized when you are aggressive. Other times you're criticized when you're not aggressive. This time, criticism's coming for Pete Carroll and company being aggressive, because I did think that really set the momentum up for the Denver Broncos, and they ultimately get the victory 10-7. Again, A.J. Cole did a really good job flipping the field, pinning the Broncos at the 1, at least inside the 5 multiple times, and inside the 23 times. Really good job. Now, he did get a punt blocked later in the game. I'll tell you about that. That didn't go very well, but he did a good job early on. The Raiders, they're now 2-7 on the season, scoring fewer than 10 points in the NFL high 4 of those 9 games. And lost 9 consecutive AFC West Division games. 9 consecutive AFC West Division games. Remember what we said at the beginning of the season? For this Raiders team to have an opportunity, they had to go 500 in the division. doesn't seem like they're going to be going 500 in the division, as again, they've lost 9 straight. The Raiders held to fewer than 30 points in 29 consecutive games. It's the longest active streak in the NFL and second longest streak in franchise history. It happened 35 times, 91 through 93, 95-game streak. So that needs to get rectified sooner rather than later. And the Raiders had 7 consecutive 3-and-outs during the game. That's just a few of the notes from the game. But let me jump into the real mistakes that happened. As I mentioned, self-inflicted wounds. The Raiders beat the Raiders. The Denver Broncos defense, obviously they had a little something to do with it. Coming into the game, you knew that they had the number one defense. You knew that they can get after the quarterback. They did. Again, they sacked Geno Smith 6 times. They even injured him late. He had a quad contusion, according to head coach Pete Carroll, and barely was able to walk. Kenny Pickett got in there for one play, and Geno Smith came back into the game. But an interception bounced off Genty's hands. Wasn't a great pass. Still bounced off his hands. Should have had it. The 6 sacks that I mentioned. 11 penalties. The Raiders had 11 penalties for 83 yards. A blocked punt happened with A.J. Cole. A missed field goal. Cash Money Carlson. We really can't call him Cash Money Carlson because, again, last week he missed the extra point. This week he's missing a field goal. Field goal would have tied it. It was only a 48-yarder. Very much in his range, and it went wide right. That just can't happen. Had a touchdown called back by penalty. Dante Thornton Jr. called for a pick play. And he, put his hand on his chest when it happened, so he knew that it was on him. Shouldn't have done that. A rookie, another rookie mistake. They went for it, as I mentioned earlier, on 4th and 5. They failed to get it. Gave the Broncos the ball at midfield that led to their only touchdown. Geno Smith with a quad contusion. Could hardly work. JPJ, he went down, right? He went down with the ankle injury. Pete Carroll said after the game it's going to keep him out for a while. Something to pay attention to. Kappa, Putnam ended up into the game as guards JPJ and Dylan Parham both went down. 70 yards of offense in the second half of the game. And oh, by the way, Ashton Genty had a 30-yard run called back because Jack Besh got called for holding on a holding call that he wasn't even close to the play. Had nothing to do with the play. And I know that you can get called for holding on every play of the game. I mean, it happens, but this was just a bad one. And again, another rookie mistake. So both rookie wide receivers, Jack Besh and Dante Thornton Jr., made big-time mistakes. Oh, by the way, right before half, Dante Thornton Jr. had a 45-yard, what would be a pass and catch, go right through his hands, right? That cost some potential points right before halftime. So again, so many mistakes that this Raiders team made. And when you come into a game and you're 2-6 and you are struggling to figure out how to win games and finish games, you're not allowed to make all those mistakes that I just rattled off. Now, again, it was not a clean game by either team, right? The teams had a combined 22 accepted penalties. That's the first game with more accepted penalties than points since December 10th, 2023. A game where the Vikings won 3-0 against the Raiders, where they had 9 combined accepted penalties. 15 drives in this game resulted in punts. So if you didn't watch it, you didn't listen to it on the radio, and you're just really going through it, hearing what I'm saying about it and recapping it, you missed 15 punts on the night. The Broncos, 10 points, the fewest by any team in a win this season. The 17 combined points in this game are the fewest in a game this season. Right? So that summarizes it right there. The Broncos didn't play a clean game, but they played clean enough to win. Right? And so ultimately they improved to 8-2, so they're feeling good about themselves, where the Raiders are saying, man, an opportunity was missed because the defense did their job, right? Adam Butler was able to get a sack. Charles Snowden was able to get a sack. Caillou Blue-Kelly got those 2 interceptions that I was talking about. They held the Broncos to under 100 yards rushing. Like, if you had told me that they were going to do that and Bo Nix was only going to throw for 150 yards and have 2 interceptions and only 1 touchdown, I think that that's a recipe for a Raiders victory. Instead, they lose 10-7. So just all in all, not a very good performance. They gave themselves a chance, but they did not play clean enough ball to win the game. So now that they're 2-7, now they don't have another game until they close out Week 11 against the Cowboys at Allegiant Stadium.
The Packers want revenge against the Philadelphia Eagles, while the Eagles want to keep atop the NFC.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Lou, I feel like we've done a million of these because we got to do a couple last year. Maybe we'll get to do a couple this year. Who knows? And for Philly, these are kind of 2 teams a little bit moving in opposite directions, given the way Philly went to their bye week, and then the Packers coming off, by the odds makers, the worst loss that they've suffered since 1970, since they've been tracking this stuff. But I think you and I, and I would say most NFL media at least, believe the Packers and the Eagles are going to be there when it matters at the end of the season. What is keyed the resurgence of this Eagles offense, I think, in particular?
Yeah, I think over the last 2 games where Jalen Hurts has put together, I think 2 of the most complete performances I've seen from his career in the regular season against Minnesota and against New York. They've been going a lot more under center. Kevin Patullo is starting to get into a rhythm as a new play caller, kind of finding this offense's identity under center, play action, utilizing heavier personnel up front with 6 offensive linemen. It really seems like it's helped ignite both the passing game vertically and the run game. And that's not normally something the Eagles have done with Jalen Hurts as a quarterback. He's more comfortable in the shotgun, but I really do think it's kind of revived both areas of their offense over the last 2 weeks, and I would expect that will continue against the Green Bay Packers, even with A.J. Brown coming back. I just think that is really allowing them to be multiple and balanced right now, which they were not through the first 6 games of the season when they were 4-2.
It feels like the more mature approach to me, like an evolution of this offense, because early on they were so RPO heavy, so reliant on being able to run zone read and kind of a version of a college offense, and using Jalen Hurts' legs. It was such a benefit. Mm-hmm. But as teams have gotten onto that, it seems like the Eagles want Jalen to run a little bit less out in space, unless he's a scrambler, like fewer designed runs. And so if you're going to do that and not attack the middle of the field, which Jalen doesn't love to do anyway, the intermediate part of the field, which Jalen kind of doesn't want to do anyway, it seems like this is such an obvious way to get there.
Right.
And it has required an evolution of the scheme, right? Like Kevin Patullo has had to make changes here. And it seems like every year, you and I love, and me in particular, love to sort of make fun of Nick Sirianni about what do you do here exactly? But they've been able to find some of these different things, like, hey, let's try something else. We know we can get to these big A.J. Brown go balls and Devontae Smith posts, and Jalen Hurts is such an accurate deep ball thrower despite not having the strongest arm, that this seems like an evolution that, I'll be honest, like not every team would say we're going to fundamentally alter the way that we play offense to try and get a spark here, and they've done that. I think they deserve a lot of credit for that.
That is one thing that Nick Sirianni does really well, is he doesn't really he's not stubborn in his laurels and his philosophies.
Yeah.
And that's something that last year also allowed them to go.
Philosophy. He's not the play
Maybe
call.
That's part of it, but
I think that, and I say that tongue in cheek, but I think that matters here because it's not his offense. It's not his baby. So he doesn't have to be precious about, no, we have to run this way.
Yeah, I think the open-mindedness, the self-awareness of this organization from top to bottom is really a strength that people don't talk about enough. Like even Howie Roseman, I feel like as the general manager, constantly changes his roster building philosophies. Nick Sirianni as well. Like last year when they were 2-2, they were throwing the ball a lot, and then they were the most run-heavy team in football and helped them win a championship. Yeah. So this year as well, they are kind of changing on the fly, and that's something that a lot of teams, a lot of coaches, I don't think would be willing to do. So it is a necessary evolution. I am somebody that I do like when a coach plays to the strengths of his personnel, right? But eventually, like you said, teams have you figured out. They have what Jalen Hurts does best figured out. You do have to also force your players to evolve at some point. And I do think that Jalen Hurts looks really comfortable under center over the last 2 games. Again, he had a perfect passer rating against Minnesota, and I thought against the Giants, that was the most complete performance he's had all year. So Jalen's evolving with it, and again, like I said, I think Monday night against Green Bay, you should expect more of that coming out of the bye week.
I think if the Packers don't, they're making a mistake. I think that there's just like no way around that. The other side of the ball, and we're going to dig into these matchups, guys, don't worry. But the thing that has surprised me, Lou, is this defense just doesn't look the same, and they can't bring hockey waves of pass rushers at you the way that they used to be able to. That's why you go out and you get Jalen Phillips. I know Nolan Smith has been dinged up, Jalen Carter in and out of the lineup, whether it's for injury or spitting on people. There's been some issues there. Yeah. But that cornerback 2 spot, they're making some, again, they're not afraid to make some big changes. Is the Cooper DeJean outside corner thing here to stay? Is that the plan?
I think that's one of the ideas, but I do think Howie Roseman just said, here, Vic Fangio, you're maybe the best defensive mind in football. Here's a bunch of options. Go figure it out. I think Jair Alexander coming in, though, gives them some optionality with DeJean maybe still staying in the slot. And I know Alexander in Green Bay, and he didn't play much in Baltimore, but a lot of the time he was playing inside. But I do think
in Baltimore when he was playing.
Yeah, it wasn't good. But unlike Michael Carter, I do think he has a little more inside-out versatility, and with Jacorian Bennett coming off injury as well, injured reserve, they might still try to make it work with DeJean in the slot, but bringing in both Carter and Alexander does give you a lot more slot experience that, DeJean, at least for 2025, could play on the boundary. Now, I don't want that for him long-term. I don't think it fits the player the best, but I think for the team, that's probably the best combination of players you could have out there is DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell on the outside, and then Carter or Alexander in the slot. So, again, they kind of had to do that. That was the last shoe to drop, the last hole in this roster. I said this could really hurt them in a playoff game. Having an Adoree Jackson or a Keely Ringo out there. They don't have Darius Slay this season. That could have been the Achilles heel that maybe cost them in a crucial moment. And now, not saying that they fixed it and brought in like another Darius Slay type of player, but there's more options. And that's what I always respect about Howie Roseman is that he doesn't really sit on his hands like some other GMs.
Yeah, Packer fans are going to take that as a shot against Brian Gutekunst, so that's okay.
I was actually doing more of a dig at Brandon Bean, who yelled at my brother for daring that suggests that they make moves.
That's right. That was your
so,
brother.
Yes, that was a dig at the AFC.
Oh, no. All right, we accept the dig at the AFC. No, you can't really say that about Brian Gutekunst anymore, right? Because he went out and he made the Micah Parsons trade.
Right.
And this is a team that Micah has had success over the years against. He and Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata are no stranger to one another. And those are heavyweight fights every time. And so he's coming off his least productive game as a pro. I expect a revitalized, a refocused Micah Parsons. He's just too good a player to not, like the 3-sack game the other week. He's just too good to be kept down for any length of time.
Right.
The other side here is interesting to me too, because the Packers have been seeing a lot more two shell. Early in the year, it was single high, and the Packers were like, okay, we're going to throw it over your head if you're going to play single high. Jordan Love had the highest 8-out in the league. He had an 8-out over 12, I think, through 2 weeks, which is just like bananas.
That's ridiculous.
And that was never going to be a thing that you could sustain over the course of a whole season. But this is the kind of defense that's going to do the same thing. They're going to put a lid on everything and make you drop everything underneath. That's just the reality of the way that they want to play defense. Why has it looked so different, though, this year?
I think for the Eagles, again, it's personnel change, right? I don't think they can always do the same things. Now that they don't, for instance, at cornerback, they don't have a Darius Slay. They've had to use some more man coverage where Quinyon Mitchell is shadowing top receivers. He's done that a lot more. Like you've seen him travel with Emeka Egbuka, Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua when they played Los Angeles, like Cortland Sutton when they played the Denver Broncos. That's been something consistently that they're doing with Quinyon Mitchell. And again, I think it's
overall, this week. The Packers don't have a guy like that.
See, that's the thing. It's been normally when they're playing an offense that has one truly elite playmaker, or at least one guy they're going to force feed, like a Malik Neighbors before he got hurt with the Giants. There's not another true number 2 there to worry about, right? No. So I think Fangio, again, he has a clear philosophy and scheme that's been set in stone for a long time, but I also do think he's really good at adjusting on the fly based on the strengths of his personnel. And this year's defense is young and it's a lot of inexperienced players. So I think that's why it's kind of had to change. And also, Peter, it's too, their front four isn't hitting home as much as it has in years past, as you alluded to earlier. The reason they had to bring in Jalen Phillips, they've had to bring in more blitzes, like using Zach Bond and Jihad Campbell as pass rushers. So they haven't been able to, I think, play exactly the same way as last year. And that's part of why Howie did what he did last week.
The NFL season is rolling along, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for this weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet in the moment, whether it's player props, a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick. It's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
It's BYU. It's Texas Tech. It is a top 10 showdown in Lubbock.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell you guys that tomorrow's game is absolutely gargantuan for BYU. It is history for the BYU football program. It'll be their first ever time being a ranked top 10 team facing off against a fellow top 10 ranked team. In fact, it's actually pretty rare air for a program like Texas Tech as well, because the last time that Lubbock, speaking of Texas Tech, had college game day in town was 2008 when number one Texas traveled there. Remember the Michael Crabtree game when Texas Tech upset them? Well, that was the first time in their history they had a top 10 showdown. And the very next week, they faced off against a top 10 ranked Oklahoma State squad. And since then, they have not played in a similar type matchup. So both of these programs are relative newcomers to the territory that they are participating in, but I don't think that's going to slow these two teams from absolutely throwing haymakers at one another. I am super, super excited for this game. I have been waiting all week to see it all play out, and I've done a number of different media appearances across the country, some in Texas, some nationwide, some local in Utah, and the prevailing sentiment is that there are a lot of people out there believe that it's in the Big 12's best interest if BYU loses this game. Let's Texas Tech and them get back on a collision course for Arlington to play in the Big 12 title game. And then BYU, in theory, gets their revenge down there in Arlington, thereby clinching the automatic college football playoff berth, but also seeing a program like Texas Tech at 11-1, likely also in the at-large conversation, if not outright clinching an at-large bid into the college football playoff, to take the Big 12 at least multiple teams in. Now, there is a program up the road from BYU, speaking of Utah, who they kind of need BYU to win out, to be quite frank. And there are other scenarios that Utah, being 13th in the country right now, according to the college football playoff rankings, could not need to play in the title game to get into the college football playoff, but the simple fact of life is BYU's up against it in this game. And I'm also of the opinion that BYU is being seriously devalued yet again when it comes to this matchup. For the life of me, I have been struggling all week long to understand that why our friends at FanDuel and other sports books out there have had BYU as big of as a 10.5 point underdog in this game. Yeah, sure. Playing in Lubbock is one thing. That's absolutely going to give Texas Tech a little bit of an edge there. Is it the new uniforms that Texas Tech is donning? Well, BYU, to their credit, they're wearing new helmets with that Sailor Coug logo on the side that I'm absolutely in love with. I love that logo, and I love the fact it's going to be featured prominently in this game. Is it the fact that they think that Texas Tech is a machine and BYU is a bit of a paper tiger? Maybe that's the case. But all BYU has done this season is prove time and time again, as evidenced by their 8-0 record. If you want to go back to extend it back to last season, 19-2 over the last 21 games, they have shown a propensity to find ways to win football games, no matter what the circumstances and no matter what happens to them in said games. There is an uncanny feeling around this BYU football program that they just won't be denied. I have used it often and said this often on this podcast for those of you who are everydayers, and I hope you all are, that a lot of times BYU understands that betting lines are there to entice bettors to bet on said games. They may be a little more outlandish, but this one feels like it's a little too large. And there's something that the odds makers out there know that you, I, and anybody else out there who may be Joe Schmo fan doesn't know. I think BYU is absolutely capable of winning this game. And what's it going to take? Well, it's going to take a lot, because you're going to need a guy like LJ Martin who's going to give it a go. We'll see how he looks early on in this game. And you got to see him kind of shrug off, to use the expression, his shoulder issue and say, I'm fine now. I had a conversation with a BYU player not that long ago, and they essentially told me, actually, it's a former BYU player, I should clarify that. It's not a current player, but did play at BYU, who indicated they had multiple shoulder injuries during their time in Provo. And their whole thought process was that when the adrenaline gets pumping, when you finally kick that ball off, you're in the middle of a game, you don't feel much of anything because, as he mentioned, the adrenaline's flowing. And we have seen some pretty impressive studies that adrenaline is an absolutely incredible thing that can help people overcome some pretty significant issues to play and perform at their best. That's what you hope for a guy like LJ Martin in this game, that he goes into it, may not be feeling 100%, but he gets out there, the juices get flowing. All of a sudden he's like, you know what? Let's go. Let's get this thing done. It's going to be imperative that BYU has to be able to manufacture some rushing offense. It may not be to the same level that they've had up until the Iowa State game. So when they went into Iowa State, they were top 10 in the country in average rushing yards per game. I think it was a shade over 230 yards on average. If BYU gets to 230 yards against this Texas Tech defense, they will have absolutely obliterated the Red Raiders. It will be a blowout if BYU gets anywhere near that number. I will say that on the record right now. But I also don't expect that from BYU in this game. This is a game you're going to have to use a little more of what they call smoke and mirrors to generate some of that rushing offense. Cody Hagan, Parker Kingston on fly sweeps. You're going to need to use the short to intermediate passing game out in the flats with guys like a Preston Rex as an extension of the rushing attack to get you those yards that are going to keep Texas Tech honest in terms of their defensive alignment. You cannot, I repeat, you cannot afford, if you're BYU, to have guys like David Bailey, Lee Hunter, Jacob Rodriguez. They have a who's who, it feels like, of a front seven that is going to probably be NFL talent in the next NFL draft or successive drafts after that. They have got a ton of talent up front, and they are going to come after Bear Bachmeier. The one thing I love about Bear Bachmeier is another key to this game is that Bear Bachmeier has been absolutely unflappable this season. He loves playing the game of football. He carries himself with it's not an arrogance, it's just a quiet confidence is probably the best way to describe it. But he knows that he belongs at this level. And to have led BYU to a sterling 8-0 record and a number 7 national ranking as a true freshman, the future looks very, very bright for him. But this is the toughest opponent to date by a fair margin, if not a wide margin. Nothing against Utah, nothing against Iowa State or anybody else that BYU has played this season. None of them hold a candle to what Texas Tech is capable of in this game. And a guy like Bear Bachmeier, he's got to be on his absolute best. He's got to be his absolute best, I should say, to help BYU win this game. Is he capable of that? I absolutely believe he is capable of it, but he needs the guys around him to step up. He needs his receivers to get themselves open and catch that ball when it comes their way. There cannot be drops. He needs guys like LJ Martin, Preston Rex, whoever else is in the backfield alongside him. They need to cover that football up. He himself needs to avoid getting this ball punched out because Texas Tech, the way they generate turnovers is they punch the ball. They strip you a lot, and you have to avoid that. And most importantly, in my mind, for BYU in this game, that offensive line has got to have its best performance to date. Isaiah Jota, Waylon Lapuaho, Bruce Mitchell, Kyle Saforchuk, Austin Leusa, Sonny Mocassini, Andrew Gentry. That's the 8-9-man rotation, essentially, that's been BYU's offensive front this season. They've got to play and perform at their absolute best this week. If they do that, they will give BYU a fighting chance. If they don't, well, you may find yourself once again looking at that collision course and hoping that you can rebound against TCU a week from tomorrow and get back into the win column and keep that dream alive of facing off for a second time against the Red Raiders in Arlington, Texas. So crazy situation. College game day in town. Students have been camping out for well over a week at this point down there in Lubbock, and it's going to be an absolutely electric, raucous atmosphere down there at Jones AT&T Stadium in Lubbock, Texas. I, for one, wish I was going to be able to be there, but I am not. But looking forward to it all the same, and it is a big opportunity staring BYU in the face.
The NFL season is rolling along and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for this weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet in the moment, whether it's player props, a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick. It's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
Running it back. Luke Fickell will be the Wisconsin Badgers coach in 2026.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers.
Chris McIntosh, Wisconsin Badgers athletic director, released a statement today confirming what I think a lot of people thought was already happening. Luke Fickell will be the Wisconsin Badgers football head coach in 2026. I think I want to just start with a couple of the statements here. This is from, and this was according to a report by ESPN and Varsity Connect with Jesse Temple. Always want to give sources. He said, Chancellor Mnuchin and I are aligned on significantly elevating investment in our program to compete at the highest level, McIntosh said. We are willing to make an investment in infrastructure and staff. As important as our ability to recruit and retain talent. And more there to, if you're subscribed to Varsity Connect, go check out what Jesse Temple's doing. But the big and short of it is Luke Fickell is the coach next year. Luke Fickell at Wisconsin so far, 15-19 overall. Obviously 2-6 this year, winless in the Big Ten. This is something I've thought, and if you've been listening to the show, this really shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. I thought this is where this was going. I have continued to say, if you know there are positives you can find here if you want to. Again, I completely understand if people were out and they want change and they're frustrated. I'm frustrated. I've been a lifelong Badger fan that's trying to turn my 11-year-old son into a Badger fan. Winning would help on that front. I think the biggest positive you take out of this is there is investment coming. There is money coming into the program. And I think that investment is going to be there regardless of whoever the coach is. But if you're somebody that was just out and you're somebody that wanted this program to move on, this is probably a frustrating day, and I get that. We got people jumping in the chat already. Let's get a couple of these comments in here. Uncultured Barbarian, great old friend of the show, talking about this is just a money thing. Kurt says he may be coming back, but when the booster money dries up and the stadium is empty, McIntosh will be looking for his job as well. Jay Daly says, let's go. Mitch says, zigging when everyone else is zagging. Obviously, a lot of coaching movement this offseason. Zach Bartz, man, good friend of the show, says, now I hope they lose every game by 30+. See, I love Zach. I love Zach. Zach's great people. I just am never going to be there. I still think they can be competitive against Washington. I think they can pull some stuff out. Let me give you a couple reasons. I'm going to give you one thing about this that really frustrates me too. Like something about this that really rubs me the wrong way. And maybe it's just a me thing. But let me give you a couple reasons why. Maybe if you're looking for reasons why this makes sense, why it could work, let me give you a couple. The first is, again, I think the money investment is real. Judging from what Chris McIntosh has said, they're going to be putting more money into the program. That's needed regardless of who the coach is. Whether you are moving on or not, that money investment is absolutely needed. They're going to be putting that into the program. That's a big deal. Again, regardless of who's at the helm of the cruise ship, you got to put the right engines in the ship, and you got to have the right money and the right investment to do that. So I think that's a big deal. I think there is an element of if you want to bank on the young talent on this team, the 24 and the 25 classes, players that have started to already show some things in Wisconsin. If you want to bank on that talent and some of the pieces in this 26 recruiting class, keeping this staff together keeps those players intact. And it's really been one of the things we talked about a lot with this coaching staff is its ability to recruit, its ability to develop talent. That's a big part of this, right? Maybe you keep that roster together. If you keep this coaching staff together, there's a chance that if you blow it all up, you're starting all over 2026. Maybe it becomes a longer rebuild. Why not see if Luke Fickell for sure is the guy or not, right? For sure can or can't do it with a little bit more money. And if he does, then it's an easier path to rebuilding with him because he's already got his pieces here, if that makes sense. But I also get it. I also get the frustration. Like, I get fans being ticked off. I get this team looking as bad as it is and looking around the landscape of college football and seeing all these other programs making moves. And it feels like Wisconsin is getting left behind. It feels like if you're looking at it from that narrative, Wisconsin isn't as serious as a Florida or a Florida State or, certainly Penn State, right? Some of these schools that have moved on, LSU, from high-priced buyouts. That doesn't mean they're going to be right either. We'll have to see. Let's get some more comments in here. Again, I'm not trying to sell anybody on this, by the way. I'm not. I've just also kind of known this has been coming for a while. So I've kind of looked at ways this could work going forward because this doesn't surprise me. I think this is where this has been trending for a long time here. Okay, let's get some more comments. Griffin says, we don't care about culture anymore. We don't care about the state anymore. Most importantly, we don't care about our alumni or fans at all. Running with Jason, so we win 6 or 7 games next season. What does that really mean long term? Live from Lavender Town says, this is what you said a few weeks back. Fickell will win a few more games next year, so they'll get to the point to that as progress, even if they aren't much better as a team. Mediocrity inbound. That is my biggest worry, and Brian Shetty hits on it. Yippee, we can't even get to mediocre next year then. I mean, I think we can get to 6, 7, 8 wins next year. My biggest fear as a Badger fan is getting mediocre. Because if you get in mediocre territory, you never pull yourself out. It's almost better to completely bottom out, which then it forces change. Mediocre is a scary thing for me. Let me tell you, I want your comments and thoughts, just your raw thoughts on this. Tell me if anybody in the chat feels like this is a good idea, bad idea. If someone's in the middle, there's a lot of people frustrated. Let me tell you the one part about this really frustrated me just off the surface. The one part that really frustrated me, and I'm not trying to be, I'll just say it. And maybe if I wait on a day, or if I think about it for a day or an hour, or maybe I feel differently. Chris McIntosh comes out and does a statement about his announcement through Varsity Connect, Badger Connect, which is, a subscription-based service. Again, I think if you're going to make an announcement like this, go have a press conference and take real questions. Take real questions. I think you owe it to the media and the fans to answer from a broad group of people. I think it's kind of, and this is nothing against Jesse Temple or anything like that. He does incredible work. Jesse Temple's awesome. But I think it's if you're going to come out and make this type of announcement and you're going to try to sell this to your fans, then go up there with a little, again, my opinion, a little more accountability, and face reporters from a lot of different places and answer questions and really talk about it and really try to be accountable to the fans. I think, to me, the messaging and the narrative just continues to miss with this program. And I've talked about it a couple times. I don't think kind of sitting behind a paywall and answering questions to someone who, to a place that probably just has a little bit more vested interest in Wisconsin working is the best way to do this. I think fans, I've said it from the jump, just want accountability. They just want honesty. They want someone to go up there and answer questions for a while, honestly, and address some of the fans' real frustration. I think that could have been handled better. I think this probably should have been a press conference. And if you're going to continue to release messages and make announcements and have a press conference, that's what you should do as the athletic director, right? As the figurehead of this department, you should go up there and be able to answer questions from people and sit down for 30 minutes and try to, even if you're not trying to sell anybody, at least hear those concerns, questions, and answer them in a broader format. I don't love how this was released. Eagle says it's official. We are a basketball school in men's sports. I listen. Ben says, is money even the issue? Our coaches cannot develop players. Again, this is kind of exactly what I thought the response would be. I do think this team can be better next year. I do think if you have healthy quarterback, you have more NIL money, I do think that makes a difference. Again, I'm also a supremely positive, optimistic guy. That's kind of who I am. I was like 5 seasons into Game of Thrones thinking all the Starks would survive outside of Ned and the older one. I was like, oh, they'll all be fine. So I'm an optimistic guy by nature. That's who I am. And I can see a path for this working. I can see a path for that 24 and 25 talent being successful. You put more money into the program. That's a big part of it. I could also see it not working, and I can see why people want to move on.
The NFL season is rolling along, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for this weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet in the moment, whether it's player props, a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
Indiana heads to Penn State this weekend as 2 touchdown favorites.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
This game was supposed to be a top 5 matchup, Zach Seiko, and now Indiana's cruising as one of the best teams in the country, and Penn State's still looking for their first win in quite some time.
Yeah, that's why I find it really interesting that people are trying to make the argument, or that there's even a semblance, a little bit of confidence that Penn State can pull off this upset. Unless Penn State's making radical changes, which they just continue to show that they're going to stay on this road, that they are afraid to push the envelope. They are afraid to make radical, necessary changes, because what are you afraid of at this point in time? You're worried about hurting a transfer's feelings, or you're worried about what bowl invite you may or may not get after the expectations were college football playoff, conference contention, national title contention. Oh, but we can't make these depth chart changes because you got to do something. And so since I don't, unless and I always try to do the mental gymnastics that, oh, this is this is coach speak, or they're trying to keep things close to the vest because they don't want to reveal anything for the opponent.
Sure.
That's just not the case. I get the sense that Penn State, if everything's status quo, which I fully expect, then Indiana should win, no problem. Do I think it would be a 4 or 5 touchdown deficit? Gosh, I would hope not. But I think 2 touchdowns is fair when it is a home game at Beaver Stadium, and Penn State still does have a healthy, talented players. But at one demoralizing loss after another, I just don't know how much energy Penn State has left to give in this game.
Well, that's kind of what we've talked about from the Indiana side of things. It's like, look, obviously the head coach gets fired, but it is at Beaver Stadium. It's in Happy Valley, and Penn State's still a talented team. Like, the guys haven't just abandoned the team, and they don't have 30 transfers out and things like that. I mean, the team is still intact. It just clearly wasn't working in the system they were operating in. And so I ask you this, Zach. If the Ohio State game had gone the way it did for the first 2 quarters, for 4 quarters, right? If that game had been close down the stretch, would that give Penn State more confidence, or maybe you and the fan base more confidence in this game? Because clearly Indiana's rolling and Penn State is not.
Well, yeah, let's be honest. It would have given them tons of life, I think. If you can go after Ohio State has now rattled off 10 wins in a row against Penn State. 10 wins in a row. So the win.
That's what it is now, 10?
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. So fortunately for Penn State, they don't have to play Ohio State again until 2028. But your question, your point being that, Penn State would have found some life or started to build some momentum. It looked that way after the first half. I mean, it was 17-14. Penn State gets a turnover. All things are at least pointing, hey, Nittany Lions could be, putting an upset together. And then they literally, it was a tale of 2 halves. They fell right back into the same thing that they've been doing, questionable play calls. Ohio State made all the necessary halftime adjustments.
Yeah.
Penn State, it seemed like they either made none or they made ones that were just detrimental. They abandoned everything that was working. And that's my issue, that the changes that you do make and the ones where you're finding success, you say, well, we can't do that because the game script wasn't even out of reach. I'm referring to the fact that Penn State was running jumbo sets with 7 offensive linemen, and Ohio State just had no answer. I mean, sure, again, eventually they were going to challenge it, but Penn State didn't even go back to it because they were down by 10, and they felt like they needed to get into a race with Ohio State. There was plenty of game left. You were down by 10. All you needed was another 15-play, easier said than done, okay? But my point being is that, am I expecting them to do things like that against Indiana? Rotate players in just to see what they can give you? Because you don't know until you actually do it on game day. Okay? Well, the players aren't showing us enough on it. This is what's really frustrating, is the argument is being made that, well, these guys aren't showing us enough on Tuesday's practice, so therefore their playing time's limited on Saturday. You don't know what they can do until they get in the game, for crying out loud. Yeah. I get it. Practice is practice, and that's what you see all the time. But you have to try something. You have to try something different. So I'm saying, if you are not truly going to say, we're all in, we're going crazy, Indiana's not going to know what hit them, then Penn State has no chance in this game.
Even being at home, which is so crazy. And again, what this game was supposed to be, right, was a top 5 matchup, top 10 minimum, but top 5 possibility at Penn State. This could be another chance for both of these teams to build their playoff resume heading down the home stretch. And look,
that's funny.
Right. I mean, hey, we're happy to be here, right? But we all know what the situation is. Again, Penn State is really looking for anything. Indiana's looking to avoid the upset as 2 touchdown favorites. And you talk about Penn State going away from what makes them successful and the little bit that they did have against Ohio State. And Indiana knows exactly what they want to do, and they do it every single time. Even in a game against Maryland, they ran the football, and ran it some more. Fernando Mendoza didn't hardly do anything, threw another interception, but he just turned around and handed the football off and did what they had to do. That's the difference, I think, right now, is Indiana has its identity on both sides of the football, and they are going to stick to it because it works. And whether it's throwing the ball, running the ball, or on defense is getting after the quarterback or dropping back in coverage, Indiana knows exactly what they want to do. I do think there is this sort of concern, though, because you just don't know, because of the reasons you laid out, Zach. What is Penn State going to do? How are they going to look? What personnel are they going to use? What game plan do they use? What play calling scheme do they come up with? we just simply don't know because it's an interim staff with a bunch of changes, and you just don't know what you're getting into. You can't watch film from the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season because that's not really relevant. So is there a way that this upset could happen? Absolutely. But it would take Penn State playing their best and Indiana probably playing their worst. Would you agree?
That's the same thing as I said for Ohio State, is that eventually, Penn State could have made it fun. They could have, and they did, right? They made it fun for a first half of football, but then eventually talent was going to take over and coaching. I mean, Penn State's coaching staff, look, I have the utmost respect for Terry Smith as an interim head coach. I don't know what happened to Andy Kotelnicki because that was a top 15 offense to now they're outside of the top 100. I would still like to think that he is somewhat of an offensive guru. But I guess when you don't have the same players, when you don't have Tyler Warren, it all falls apart. And then Jim Knowles, hey, if you don't have 5-star talent all across the field, is he even that good of a coordinator? So Indiana, even if they get into a close situation and Penn State's, building some confidence, building some momentum down the stretch, we're in it, man. We can, and that's how Northwestern, UCLA, they were able down the stretch, they built that belief like, oh, we're in it, we're here. But at that point in time, Indiana's just going to be able to out-talent and out-coach Penn State down the stretch, so even if this is a close game, I really don't see it where Indiana, could this be close? Sure, but kind of the same thing with Ohio State. I'm not expecting a win here whatsoever. If they cover, great. I am no wins for Penn State this weekend.